So welcome to another episode of the Recurring Value Podcast, where every week we shine the light on what really means to have post-sale success, because ultimately recurring revenue requires recurring value. I'm your host, Brett Sears, co-founder and CEO of AdoptIQ, where we believe that B2B SaaS shouldn't operate in a transactional model, but really focus on a recurring revenue model that drives revenue from both the product and the team to make sure that everything happens, right? That's why we're here doing this podcast today, is to learn from the smartest people in the space and to really figure out how to collapse the time frame. Today, I'm really excited to have Rob Zambito, a seasoned customer success leader and consultant with over 10 years of experience in the startup ecosystem. Rob specializes in building and scaling customer success teams, transforming them from a cost center to revenue-generating powerhouse. I think we're gonna have some fun talking. He's successfully grown teams and implemented foundational systems to drive customer engagement and retention. Rob's got a strong background in consumer psychology and behavioral economics and continues to apply these insights to improve customer experiences. I'm excited to dive into Rob's journey and to see his approach to post-sale success and the strategy he employs to drive customer adoption and growth. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you for having me, Brett. You're going to make me blush. Jeez.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on. I've watched you on LinkedIn and sort of the impact. So I'm really excited to sort of pick your brain and to grow from there. So thank you for taking the time.
No, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And likewise.
Can you give everybody sort of a background sort of on where you are, sort of a little bit of your path and sort of how you see you fitting in this space?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess starting with where I am, the best way to summarize the last decade for me is that I've built and scaled 3 customer success teams at full-time roles from scratch. And then I decided then to start a consulting practice doing exactly that. So now I'm founder and CEO of Success Scaled Consulting, which is a practice that I started about 4 years ago on the side, went full-time about 1.5 years ago, and haven't looked back since. I mean, it's been the most amazing journey in my professional career so far, getting to work with my real specialties are typically with early stage customer success programs, helping them build the foundations and ideally build them the correct way, and also helping build out expansion motions for customer success teams. Because I noticed that that's especially precious right now, where customer success teams have to show the revenue impact that they're driving to justify their own team's existence, really.
Right, which is something we're going to get into because it's an interesting sort of idea. But so as a consultant, when you go in and a company hires you, one, they've recognized that they're having a problem and they've probably tried to solve it on their own a handful of times, and then they're calling you out of desperation. Is that a good assessment of when you get that bat signal?
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't always like to think of it as desperation. Sometimes it is, but it's usually one of 4 problems. It's either A, we have big problems with our onboarding and adoption. B, we have big problems with our churn, or maybe we're coming up on our first renewals and we don't know how to handle them. We don't have a renewals workflow. C, our customer success team is not expanding our accounts. And here we are trying to brand ourselves as a land and expand model, but we're not doing that. So that's usually another pain point that I hear. Or D is we're not getting enough referrals and customer advocacy from our customers. So that's where we work on things like referral programs and case studies and testimonials and online reviews and that kind of thing. That presupposes that the customers are healthy enough in the first place to give positive reviews, but it's always one of those 4 pain points, really.
So when you walk in and you sit there, because whether I assume that whether it's a consultant or someone in that job, right? You were doing it as a job before and realized that you could do it for multiple companies rather than one. Yeah. Right. So this is applicable to people building out CS teams or being able to grow. Do you find that usually companies have one of those problems, or are they varying degrees of each of them that you have to figure out how do I attack the biggest pain point, but also support the others?
So it's more the latter. It's more a bundle that people look at customer success and they say, I don't know what this thing is, how to build it. We don't have any playbooks in place. We don't have the right role definitions. We don't have the right systems or data in place. That's the most common thing. And then so what we do is I typically work with clients to go through a maturity assessment and say, like, let's take an honest diagnostic of where things are today. See if I can even provide value. Because if I can't, good luck, you're fine. But if I can, then we structure out a month-by-month plan where we tackle each of those domains of the customer lifecycle. So maybe it's onboarding, and then it's customer health scoring, and then it's renewals, then it's expansion, and then it's advocacy, and maybe customer support for that kind of thing. That's the typical motion.
Awesome. Okay. So one of the areas that I'm really interested, I like sort of back end motivations on how we get certain places. So, one of the things that I've spent a lot of time is that recognizing that there's a sales funnel that everyone knows, right? We understand that sales to marketing and the roles and every one of those accounts, like how that works. We've seen the funnel that starts wide and then there's like the little dollar that comes out at the bottom and we're like, we win, right?
Right.
The problem is that that's a transactional model. Like that is how traditional sales, when there is a transaction, right? I need something, I buy something, and now I own it. But we chose B2B SaaS, which is an expanding revenue model, which is awesome. You build it once, you continue to provide value, and you can control your revenue. But that really shifts from a transactional, the money falls out at the bottom, to where the game actually stops when the money comes out and it's expansive.
Yep.
But that particular mindset from onboarding to engagement to expansion doesn't seem to have made it to the sort of known world that this is actually not transactional. We should probably prioritize post-sale because that's where the real revenue comes in.
Yeah, I love hearing that because it speaks to the exact ethos of what I'm trying to build and all the customer success teams that I'm working with, where the core mission of what I'm trying to do is I look around at customer success. I see a lot of people struggling with the way customer success is built today because a lot of CS teams are built as reactive cost centers of a business. And so my personal mission is to help out people who are in seats like I was in before and help turn their customer success teams into proactive revenue generating engines where you're right. I mean, when that deal is closed won and we see like sales is out there ringing gongs and high-fiving and celebrating and going to happy hours to celebrate their new deal. Meanwhile, on my side, I'm like, this is barely just begun. Right? I mean, there is a whole life cycle. This is like a birth where it's like, okay, great. We got their 9 months of pregnancy. And now there's the actual birth and the actual child development that needs to happen. Or like, it would be like, I told you I'm a Jets fan. If I watch the Jets score a touchdown, and sure, of course, I'm high-fiving because it never happens. But like, we can't stop there. We got to win the game, a lot more to it than that. It's more like they score a field goal on, that's maybe to cut the lead to 10.
And I can go so many sort of directions with that. But one of the things that I've been sort of writing about is like this mindset working with CS teams of, if we think about the sign one contract as a POC, it's a 1-year POC that says this now goes, right? They have to actually get value because on the sales side, if they've got a big POC, they throw everything at it to make sure that they're attentive and they're on top of it. They support it. There's so much because it's that. But what part of it feels like with the CS side is identifying roles, understanding where success is, how the team works together so that they're not stepping on each other's toes and invalidating. But it feels like the CS side understands that. It's the rest of the world that has a hard time sort of knowing what to do with it, where things then get confusing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And it's kind of baffling to me that the world is still trying to wrap their head around this model. And it's baffling because, I understand on the one hand, you can look at customer success and say, okay, it's a relatively new field. By most rough metrics, it's like, 15-ish years old as an industry. Basically, it's as old as SaaS is, as a common practice that I think most people attribute Salesforce to being, the origin story of this. But really though, I thought about it long and hard and I was like, the practices of account management and maintaining subscription models is that's age old, right? I mean, think about gyms. Gyms do the same thing, right? They want to make sure you're successful in your first month as a gym member. And they want to identify your value outcomes, right? Whether you're there to gain muscle or lose weight or socialize with your friends or play tennis or go swimming or whatever. They want to identify your value outcomes, make sure you get to those efficiently so that you keep renewing on your subscription because really that's where the real money is made. Same thing for, any other subscription model. So yeah, it is surprising to me that we're still sort of preaching this gospel, but it's not the worst thing in the world. I'm happy that it helped us carve.
Yeah, I think that the world sort of, right, everyone's in this consternation of, is it revenue, is it not? It feels like there's gonna galvanize over the next 3 or 4 years. It's gonna be like, oh, this is what it is, and there's gonna be a BDR, SDR, AE type of structure that is just known, and you're like, oh, that is the organism of post-sale success, right? That I don't usually call it customer success. I think of it as this post-sale success team because it really goes across, the horizon of that.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I want to sort of get into, because you're going in and anyone, right, they're either in a really healthy model and they're just running it, or they're going to run experiments and they're like, okay, we have this problem. How do we get better? So how do you, and you and I talked a little bit about this, but like, I'd love to hear how you think about experimentation. What's work? What doesn't work? What do you know when it doesn't work? Like, what are some things that people can do on rolling those things out? And maybe they can steal 10 years of your experience on one of the things that works.
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. It's one that hits to home because, like I told you before, I personally, in my heart of hearts, I feel like I'm an academic. I'm meant to be an academic, but I'm working here in customer success. And what comes with that is a mindset of experimentation, right? Like I studied consumer psychology, and it's that whole field is built around the idea of creating experiments in our social world that help prove different hypotheses or disprove hypotheses. However, I have found in the startup world, one of two things happens. Either A, there is like no experimentation and we just go off of anecdotes, or B, I would say my like smartest friends who have founded companies, smartest by academic definitions at least, like academically gifted friends, they actually spend way too much time trying to think and plan and experiment and think about step 10 before they've even got step 1. And so I've sort of tried to find a healthy middle ground where we have like really clearly defined durations for very clear experiments. And I can give some examples if
that'd be great.
If that would be helpful. So the one that's coming to mind is the first time I launched an online university to train users on our platform. Started as a complete disaster, ended up being a huge success. But basically what was happening at the time, what I noticed on the ground was I was working with the smartest people I knew. And I noticed that all of our collective IQ was being spent on using these same redundant training talk tracks for all the same customers. We'd come in early, we'd stay late, and we'd spend the whole day just saying the same things over and over again to different user groups. And then I went to a Panera Bread and I saw somebody in the back with headphones on. And I asked the person at the register, I was like, what's she doing? And they were like, she's training. And I was like, okay, so video-based training and certification programs more generally, like if they're good enough to teach someone how to make a sandwich, why can't they be good enough to, to teach people how to use our software? And so I kind of had this harebrained idea at the time. I was like, let me look into this. I learned the term LMS, which I had never heard before. It's like 2017, where I think the LMS space was, it was not very busy yet relative to how it is now. And basically, long story short, we created this hypothesis that we could create an online university and certification program that would dramatically reduce the amount of time we would have to spend training each user, personalize a training journey for each user. And the other cool idea was like, maybe we could even layer expansion motions into this training program, right? I mean, if there was like a money button, as we called it, not to sound too, too revenue driven here, but our whole spirit of our customer success program was to make it the revenue engine of the company. Long story short, we did all this work to lead up to this launch. We're super gung-ho about it, ready to go. And just like for the first month or two, it was grueling. We just crashed and burned. We had people saying like, oh, I was told I was going to have white glove service. We're like, okay, we got to go edit that out of the sales scripts. That verbiage, at least, we've got to modify it. We've got to also update our customer success training motions so that we actually do still provide them a tailored experience, despite the fact that they're doing online certifications. Yep. We've got to help people celebrate their certifications more and share them on LinkedIn. So we did stuff like that. And then really clever thing we did was we even built incentive programs around completion of this training program. So, for example, a customer could get a rebate at the point where all of their users finish the training program. So long and short of it is that we ended up building a very effective model that was really effective for us. For the first time in our company history, we showed meaningful margin expansion by getting all this time back that we were spending training. And our users had huge accomplishments in terms of what they got they got professionally certified in our software, which was really cool.
So one, that makes so much sense. And it's funny how obvious things become after the fact. And that part of why we're building what we're building is sort of the next level of what we think will be that same level of obviousness. But it's always interesting when you're like, hey, we've got this idea, it makes sense. It's normal in the outside world. Why don't we bring it here? How was the buy-in from the team and the management team and stuff like that? Because these are resources, these are time. It's sort of an experiment that makes sense intellectually, but there wasn't a frame of reference. How did you manage the C-suite on that step?
Yeah, well, I was fortunate to be dealing with a skeptical C-suite, because I remember the CEO said to me, I've never heard of an LMS before. Are you sure this is a real thing? I was like, I don't know what you mean by real thing, but I mean, I think so. So I had to, but what I did is I've noticed that, like, we in customer success or post-sale success, whatever you want to call it, one of the great ironies about our jobs is that we have a hard time like showing the ROI of the work we're doing, when like that's kind of the whole point of our jobs is to show the ROI of our products, but we don't necessarily do it for our own jobs. So what I've learned is that the more I can tie back to financial forecasts, everything I'm working on, the better off I'll have a seat at the table with the C-level. So in this case, it was like, hey, I know we're coming up on our Series B. How about we show a little margin expansion, right? Or I know we're coming up on our Series B. What if we show that this new cross-sell motion that we just launched, that we can actually generate deal velocity in a product-led, really low customer acquisition cost method through this online training portal? And so it was one of the things that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to help a lot of folks in customer success or post-sale success learn the language of their C-suite, because that's often the thing that gets them a seat at that table.
Yep.
But it was not learned without a lot of mistakes along the way. I'll put it that way.
Are there, because I get that feedback a lot from different folks, are there resources, is there a course, or is there anyone how does a customer success person go from, okay, I'm servicing the customer, I'm finding the value, oh, I now need to level up my game on this financial side, which is a different skill set. Is there, and I'm just sort of putting you on the spot here, but is there any resources that you know or you can share with me and I can put in the show notes where someone could go take a crash course on familiarity of terms?
You know, it's a good question, and I don't know any off the top of my head, at least ones that wouldn't sound like I'm trying to shamelessly self-plug my services or anything like that.
Shamelessly self-plug your services.
But the thing is, like, I learned this actually by talking with consultants and people in my network who were generous enough to lend me their time. And I'm happy to do this too for anybody who wants to just take time for some office hours and chat about the metrics that are most relevant to the initiatives you're working on. But I don't know a really efficient way to sort of educate folks about this language, this verbiage that earns a seat at the table. But you are giving me an idea. I don't know. Maybe I could build a course for this.
Yeah. So I was just thinking, I'm like, we need a Google Doc that's shareable, that sort of crowdsources the terms that they're finding it, and then be able to build a course on it. So
yeah, there we go.
So let me sort of dive in. Sorry,
can I actually add one quick thing?
Yeah.
You know, one thing, a resource that I've been using lately that I didn't have access to for the hardest parts of my career is I've sometimes just used AI tools and instructed them, act like a venture capitalist, act as a board member of an early stage SaaS company, act as a CEO of an early stage SaaS company. I'm going to present to you my ideas, and you're going to teach me the language that helps me put it in your terms that makes sense to you. So there's just a wealth of resources out there now that have ballooned that I think people have access to that could be really effective.
Yep. Totally agree. It's awesome. Let me ask you this. So, and you talked about it in your 4 different stages. So there's onboarding, there's support, there's CS, sort of the vision stuff. And you sort of told the story of, you see that as they're equal parts, they're different jobs, but they're equal parts of sort of the user journey. Customer success folks are like, I'm not in support. I'm not but every company has to wear different hats as they grow through that process. How do you see, and just like a couple minutes, companies growing through that to where they bring someone on that's like in charge of the customer. And then as they get bigger, they start expanding into more dynamic roles?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's really hard for early stage companies to figure out because and this is one of the reasons why I also don't like going on LinkedIn too, because there's a lot of like very prescriptive, absolutist advice that's for like only companies of a certain stage with a certain team structure, but maybe even certain product type or go-to-market motion. But regardless, I think usually the way I see it is that the CS team develops with one all-around athlete, so to speak, someone who is meant to do all of these motions. And usually that starts when the first customers are onboarding and need support and need basic account management, but there's no renewals on the table yet because the company's that new. Once the renewals start hitting, that's where there becomes a necessity to segment out the more tactical matters of customer engagement, which is around, I would say, support and onboarding. Those kind of like bucket together as more blocking and tackling. And then there's post-launch customer success that involves health scoring, that involves renewals management, maybe it involves expansion and upsell, maybe it involves advocacy. So the more forward-thinking, or what people tend to say are strategic, parts of customer success. I do that in air quotes because that term means everything to everyone, but regardless. After that, then I think each of those subdomains becomes its own specialty. So at scale, you might have a different support person, from onboarding person, from customer success manager to an expansion AE to a renewals AE to a customer advocacy manager, like that kind of thing. And you might even have subdivisions within those. You might have like tier 1 support, tier 2 support, tier 3 support, or that kind of thing. Enterprise onboarding versus SMB onboarding versus digital onboarding, or like that kind of thing. So there's a lot of different ways that shakes out over time, but I see it as kind of this like little explosion of each role over time.
Yeah. I think that if it's done and we understand this transition over the next 3 to 5 years, this side starts really driving revenue and expansion to a really measurable way. It allows the resources and the attention to go, says, because right now, everything's like CS is added to the magic number. It used to be sales and marketing, now it's sales, marketing, and CS, which drives down sort of the value prop of the SaaS. But you're like, not if CS drives full extension in that net RR. And so the better we get at this, the more we can codify it, the more we can provide the resources and do it, we can actually do the job better and showcase the value.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's where the pressure comes for a lot of CS teams to think more heavily about things like their expansion motions and how they're doing sales training for their customer success teams. Something that's, I'll put it this way, it's not done very commonly. But
right. Well, and it's low profile selling would be the recommendation.
Right.
Like there's so much influence driving and the ability to, because it's helping someone recognize their value rather than creating the pain points. You already know it.
Yeah.
And so it's just connecting the dots, but there's a mindset. So last sort of question on this, because you're like, as a consultant, right, you're boots on the ground, you've seen this, right, you're active. So you're going to become a thought leader in this space. You are one. So like what you think about and what a group of people talk about starts to become the beating of that drum. What do you think the future trends are? There's AI, there's all these things. Like, how do you see this area growing and expanding over the next 5 years?
Yeah, this is a great question. Also appreciate you saying I'm a thought leader. I was joking with some friends yesterday. I was like, what are the qualifications to be a thought leader anyway? But
someone to call you one.
Yeah, there you go. So I think one of the interesting ones I've been thinking about lately is that a friend of mine and I were talking about this yesterday. His hypothesis is actually that interfaces are going to change to become much more natural for us as everyday people. So for example, like ChatGPT, within the last few weeks launched the ability to just have a voice conversation with ChatGPT. I've been using that like crazy because it's so much easier for me. If I'm like driving or something like that, I can just talk about things like, well, how does the internet work anyway? Right. And then this is my friend's example. He's like, I just started learning about fiber optic cables when I was driving. Or in my example, it was I was listening to a song and I was like, I like these lyrics. So let me dive deep on what these lyrics mean. And ChatGPT just had this like incredible way of just having this conversation with me. So I think more than just saying AI, I think specifically it's AI applications to user interfaces. Also behind the scenes functions like health scoring, that still has not really been done. If you look at like a lot of the, big players in the customer success space, they're quote unquote using AI in certain ways to do things like draft emails, but a lot of the true predictive analytics haven't really hit the market in a meaningful capacity yet. So
It's true.
It's kind of interesting to see how that's going to change.
There's a lot of fun things that can be done on that side. So,
yeah.
But it's interesting. I've never thought about, you're basically creating a self-serve podcast.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a great way to think of it. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. All right. So any advice for somebody that's looking in like B2B and they're like, I like people, I understand this market, I understand it's expanding, and they're cheered towards sort of the service side and the support side. Any advice for someone to start and get better and sort of grow in the space?
Invest in your own sales training. It may not, a lot of people turn to the service side or the success side thinking like, okay, well, I'm not really a seller, so I guess this is what I'll do. I like helping people, that kind of thing. And that's beautiful. That's wonderful. I love that. Don't ever lose that. But I will say that the most differentiating factor I see on the job market right now is the ability to sell. And that doesn't necessarily mean closing deals, right? But it might mean selling product adoption during onboarding, right? Might mean selling renewals when there's an auto renew clause. And like, you don't think of it as a sale, but guess what? It's a sale. And your candidacy as a candidate goes way up, in my opinion, if you can say like, hey, I'll take your renewals and I'll nudge through a 5% price increase to match inflation or something like that. Or I can help build this CS motion to be, even if it's a support motion, it's like I can turn this support motion into being a support sales motion where every customer who calls gets consultative. They don't just get, they're issued, troubleshooted, whatever the past of that is. But they also get consultative advice and they get introduced to our expansion products. So that's a big piece of advice that I'm finding really helpful in the job market right now, which is more competitive than I've ever seen it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's again, so obvious 5 years from now that people are gonna be like, I can't believe that was even a thing.
Yeah.
But that's really, really good. All right. We're sort of finishing up. So I do these rapid fire, a couple questions and stuff like that. Sure. Just to sort of go in. So they're fun, but it's pretty straightforward. In one sentence, what advice would you give to a CEO thinking about account success after the sale to sort of institute in their business? How should they think about it?
Continuing on the B2B assumption, I would say think really critically about your customers' customers, because I have found that the companies that build the strongest network effects and have the longest staying power in the industry are the ones where the CS motions are so proactive and so revenue generating that they're building services and products and selling to their customers' customers. That's what I think. I think all the companies that are doing that, companies like the ones that I've been at before, like that, I think those are the ones that are going to be here in 10 years.
Awesome. Who should own onboarding tours and feature rollout? Should it be product, onboarding, CMSs? Like who should own building those?
Like the first thing that comes to mind is like, if we're thinking B2B versus B2C.
All B2B.
Okay. All right. So assuming B2B, I hate to say this for my CS people out there, but I'm going to give this one to product, because I think product has a better ability to sort of sit in the ivory tower and run experiments to test adoption. Product also has usually more ready access to the data to validate, their hypotheses. But I think that most CS teams, most of the time product teams don't invest their time in this. So if your product team's not doing it for you, you're going to have to figure out ways to do it yourself with like email cadences and that kind of thing, and show the data to your product team, then go build the product that will pay back. in the long run.
Right. It is product right now. I don't think it should be.
Yeah.
Because they're not working with the customer and the users, and they've got a job to be able to do. I actually feel really bad for product because they have to build the product that the sales team features that they sold that they can't quite do. They have to solve the problems that the support team recognizes are major problems. And then they have to build the roadmap that the CS team's promising.
Yeah.
And they have to do all of that without really talking to anybody.
I feel for them too, but not that much.
I know, right?
No, I'm just kidding.
And the last sort of part, like, do you like tech? Like, do you find are you a tech software guy that enjoys software, or like, are you a people side?
So this is interesting. I never thought of myself as a tech person, and I still don't. And I think, ironically, that's what makes me better at my job, because I'm so resistant and so curmudgeon-y when it comes to change that I know all the jujitsu to do change management and to help technology adoption for your most skeptical users, because I am one. So I would say, if I have to choose between those, I would say no, I'm not. But because I'm not, I am.
Makes sense. Awesome. Well, this has been a great conversation, Rob. I really, really, really enjoyed it. First of all, how can people follow you? How can they find you? Tell us a little bit about what you're working on, like that shameless plug that you don't want to do that I told you I'm going to make you do. Tell people about where they find you.
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest. Rob Zambito, easy to find. Success Scaled, you can follow my company there. You can also reach out to me, hello@robzambito.com. And I'm happy to offer free sessions with anybody who just wants to talk shop and chat about any of these things. I'm also working on a podcast with a couple friends. It's called The Daily Stand-Up. So it's a micro podcast. It's only 10 to 15 minutes. We bring on guests from all backgrounds, and we ask them one question, which is, what is on your mind in customer success? So you don't have to have any special credentials. You don't have to have any, you don't have to be a 10-time leader of a team. You don't have to have nothing. Everybody with an opinion. It could be even, my mom trying to explain what I do for a living can come on, just chop it up for 10 or 15 minutes. And we post a video every day. So if anybody wants to join, that's a great way to get introduced and get your name out there too. So
awesome. Yeah, I've watched it. It's fun. So fantastic. Well, as we're finishing up, I want to thank everybody for being a part of this, spending time with Rob. Recurring Value Podcast is really designed to highlight post-sale success, what is needed, right? How do we build not only the product, but the team that's going to be there to support it? If this made any sense, you like it, please like the video. If you have any questions or want to reach out or have thoughts or ideas, you can reach us at support@recurringvalue.productions. We're taking any support we can and really having some fun. So Rob, thanks so much, and we'll talk to everybody soon.
Thank you.